As I reflect upon the beginning of my journey with John, it's impossible to ignore the inkling of doubt that lingered in my mind. Our early days were a whirlwind of laughter, stolen glances, and shared dreams. John was everything I had ever hoped for in a partner: caring, witty, and endlessly supportive. But beneath the surface of our budding love story, there was a shadow that threatened to cast doubt over our future together: his mother. I remember the first time he opened up about her. We were sitting on a park bench, hands intertwined, when he turned to me with a look of seriousness I had never seen before. "Mary," he began, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, "there's something you need to know about my mother." I urged him to continue, a mixture of curiosity and concern swirling within me. John's eyes held a depth of pain, as if recounting these stories was reopening old wounds. "My relationship with my mother is complicated," he confessed, his voice carrying a hint of resignation. "She's not what she appears to be." I leaned in, searching his eyes for the truth behind his words. "What do you mean?" John sighed, his fingers nervously tracing patterns on the back of my hand. "She's manipulative, Mary. She has a way of getting what she wants, no matter the cost. I've seen her tear apart families, destroy friendships, and I've even felt her influence in my own life." I couldn't help but feel a knot tighten in my stomach. The woman he described seemed like a character from a thriller, not a real-life mother. "But why does she do all this?" I asked, struggling to comprehend the complexity of his narrative. He looked at me, his eyes holding a mixture of sadness and frustration. "Money, power, control, those are her motivations. And she'll stop at nothing to achieve them." I took a moment to process his words, a sense of unease settling over me. Could his stories really be true? Was it possible for a mother to be so conniving and heartless? Before I could voice my doubts, John continued, his voice tinged with a hint of bitterness. "I've kept my distance from her for a reason, Mary. I don't want her toxic influence seeping into our relationship. But I also want you to be prepared. If we decide to take this journey together, you'll have to face her someday." I squeezed his hand gently, offering him a reassuring smile. "John, we're a team. I'll stand by your side no matter what challenges come our way." He nodded, his gaze finally meeting mine with a mixture of gratitude and relief. "Thank you, Mary. Just promise me you'll always remember what I've told you. It's important that you understand the kind of person she truly is." Little did I know that those words of caution would shape the course of our future in ways I could never have anticipated. As I reflect upon that pivotal conversation, I can't help but wonder how much of an impact John's mother would truly have on our lives. The day of our wedding arrived with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. The sun bathed the venue in a warm glow, casting a sense of magic over the entire scene. I stood at the altar, my heart racing as I waited for John to make his way to me. My bridal gown felt heavier than ever, laden not only with layers of fabric, but also with the weight of my emotions. As the music swelled and the guests turned to see the groom's arrival, I couldn't help but notice a subtle shift in the atmosphere. John's normally radiant smile seemed a touch strained, his eyes holding a hint of apprehension. My heart ached at the sight, but I brushed off the unease, chalking it up to pre-wedding jitters. As John finally stood before me, his hand extended to clasp mine, I caught a fleeting glance exchanged between him and his mother. It was a brief moment, but the intensity of their gaze was undeniable. A chill ran down my spine, and for the first time, I began to truly understand the gravity of his warnings about her. The ceremony proceeded, and as we exchanged our vows, the words felt both surreal and sacred. But when it was time for John's mother to give her speech, the air grew tense. Her smile was a facade, her eyes glittering with a coldness that sent shivers down my spine. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice dripping with honeyed venom, "today, we celebrate the union of two souls. Mary, my dear, you must truly be something special to have captured my son's heart." A smattering of uneasy laughter filled the air, and I felt the weight of her scrutiny settle upon me. "And while we toast to this beautiful occasion," she continued, her tone shifting subtly, "let us not forget that appearances can be deceiving. Let us remember that love is a delicate thread, easily broken by the slightest tug." Her words hung in the air like a dark cloud, casting a pall over the joyous celebration. I stole a glance at John, his jaw clenched and his grip on my hand tightening. His mother's words seemed to pierce through him, but he stood resolute, his eyes never leaving mine. In that moment, a fire ignited within me. I was determined to stand strong beside John, to prove that our love was unbreakable, no matter the challenges his mother presented. As the applause finally erupted, drowning out her last insidious words, I turned to John, a defiant smile playing on my lips. "I promise you," I whispered, my voice firm and unwavering. No matter what storms come our way, we'll weather them together. He met my gaze, his eyes softening with gratitude and love. Thank you, Mary. Your faith in us means the world to me. Little did I know that this would be the first of many battles we would face as a couple. The unveiling at the altar was just the beginning of a tumultuous journey, one that would test the limits of our love and resilience. And as I gazed into John's eyes, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, we were in it together. After the euphoria of our wedding day settled, John and I embarked on the journey of building a life together. Our new home became a sanctuary of love, laughter, and shared dreams. As we settled into the rhythm of our life, the memory of John's mother's warning lingered like a shadow, a constant reminder of the challenges we might face. Our days were filled with simple joys, cooking together in our cozy kitchen, debating the best way to arrange our furniture, and reveling in the comfort of each other's company. John's love and support never wavered, and I often found myself marveling at the depth of his commitment to our relationship. However, the specter of his mother's manipulation was never far from our thoughts. It began subtly, a request for money here, a veiled comment there. John, ever the protector, shielded me from the worst of it, but I couldn't help but notice the strain it placed on him. One evening, as we sat on the couch, a stack of bills on the coffee table before us, I broached the subject cautiously. John, I began, my voice gentle, I can't ignore the fact that your mother's requests for money seem to be increasing. He sighed, his gaze fixed on the bills. Mary, it's complicated. She's been like this for as long as I can remember. She has a way of making me feel guilty, like I owe her something. I took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You don't owe her anything, John. We're building our own life now, and we need to focus on our future. He met my eyes, gratitude and weariness warring within them. I know, Mary. It's just hard to break free from that guilt sometimes. As the months went by, we faced the challenge head on. We worked together to set boundaries and make financial decisions that were best for us. It wasn't easy, and there were times when John's mother's manipulative tactics threatened to drive a wedge between us. But our love and determination prevailed, and we slowly began to find our footing. Despite the difficulties, we managed to save enough money to buy a house, a place that would truly be our own, free from the toxicity of John's mother's influence. With excitement in our hearts, we moved into our new home, ready to build a life that was uniquely ours. Little did I know that the challenges we had faced were merely a prelude to what was to come. As we settled into our new home, the true extent of John's mother's conniving nature would become painfully clear. But together, we would navigate these stormy waters, drawing strength from the love we had built and the promises we had made to one another. Our new house stood as a testament to our resilience and determination. With every room we decorated, every wall we painted, it became a haven of love, a sanctuary where the echoes of our laughter and dreams resided. As we settled into our new life, we decided to celebrate our accomplishment with a housewarming party, a joyful occasion that would bring our friends and family together. The day of the party arrived, and the sun bathed our backyard in a warm glow. The air was filled with the tantalizing aroma of barbecue, and the sound of laughter and chatter reverberated through the air. It was a picture, perfect scene, a snapshot of happiness that I hoped would erase the lingering shadows of our past. As guests mingled, sharing stories and admiring our new home, I couldn't help but notice John's mother's arrival. Her demeanor was polite, but there was a calculating gleam in her eyes that made my heart race. I exchanged a glance with John, a silent understanding passing between us. As the day wore on, the atmosphere shifted subtly. John's mother seemed strangely fixated on our house, her gaze lingering on every corner, every detail. She made small talk with our guests, but I could sense an undercurrent of tension in her interactions. It wasn't long before she approached us, a feigned smile on her lips. John, Mary, I must say, your home is quite lovely. Thank you, John replied politely, though there was a guardedness in his tone. She turned to me, her smile a touch too saccharine. Mary dear, have you ever considered trading houses? I blinked in surprise, not quite sure I'd heard her correctly. Yes, she continued, her eyes glinting with a hint of something I couldn't quite decipher. My little old house has served me well, but your new home is so much more spacious and comfortable. I'm sure we could come to an arrangement. My heart raced as I processed her words. Was she actually suggesting what I thought she was? John's grip on my hand tightened, his jaw set in a firm line. We appreciate the offer, but we're quite happy with our new home, John responded, his voice steady. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. Are you sure? It's a generous offer, and I assure you my house holds sentimental value." I met her gaze with a mixture of disbelief and defiance. "This house holds sentimental value for us too, and we're not interested in trading." Her demeanor shifted, her eyes narrowing as a hint of anger flared within them. "Very well then, if that's your final decision." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving behind a palpable sense of tension. The party continued, but her presence cast a shadow over the festivities. As the day came to a close, I looked around at our friends and family, the people who had stood by us through thick and thin. Despite the unease that had punctuated the day, the sense of unity and support was undeniable. And as I glanced at John, I knew that together, we could weather any storm, even the looming threat of his mother's manipulation. Life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs, and tragedy struck our lives when we least expected it. John fell ill, a rare and debilitating illness that left us both reeling. The once vibrant man who had stood by my side through thick and thin was now confined to a hospital bed, his strength fading with each passing day. I stood by his side, holding his hand as we faced the uncertain future together. The hospital room was a stark reminder that life could change in an instant, and the bonds we had forged were being put to the ultimate test. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of John's condition became undeniable. The doctor's words were a cruel echo of our worst fears, and I watched as he fought with every ounce of strength he had left. But the illness was unrelenting, and despite his determination, John's condition deteriorated. One day, as I sat by his bedside, his hand weakly grasping mine, he turned to me with a weary smile. "Mary, I want you to know that you've brought immeasurable joy into my life. No matter what happens, I want you to remember that." Tears welled up in my eyes, threatening to spill over. "John, don't talk like that. We're going to fight this together." He shook his head gently, his eyes holding a mixture of sadness and acceptance. "Mary, my love, sometimes we have to face the reality of the situation. I want you to be prepared for whatever comes next." As the days turned into nights, the hospital room became a cocoon of shared memories and whispered conversations. John's strength waned, and it was agonizing to watch him slip away, bit by bit. Then, one fateful day, John's battle came to an end. As I held his hand and watched his chest rise and fall for the last time, a sense of profound loss washed over me. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of my heart shattering into a million pieces. The grief was overwhelming, and in the midst of my pain, his mother's presence loomed once again. As we gathered to mourn John's passing, she seized the opportunity to claim his belongings, the tangible reminders of a life that was cut short too soon. She approached me, a twisted smile on her lips, her eyes calculating. "Mary dear, I think it's time we discuss what happens next." I looked at her, my grief mingling with anger. "Can't you see that I'm mourning the loss of my husband? Have some decency?" Her smile didn't waver, her demeanor unapologetic. "Of course, dear, but I believe we have some matters to attend to. You see, John's possessions, his car, his personal belongings, they rightfully belong to me." My voice trembled with a mixture of grief and indignation. "How can you even think about these things right now? Have you no compassion?" Her eyes bore into mine, her tone dripping with venom. "It's a shame, really. He left us so suddenly, and without a will, his possessions default to his next of kin, which would be me." I clenched my fists, struggling to contain my anger. These belongings are not just objects, they're memories of a life we shared. They belong to me as much as they belong to you. She shrugged, as if my emotions were of no consequence. "Well, Mary, I'm willing to make a deal. I'll give you his belongings in exchange for the house." My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to give you our home? The home we built together?" She nodded, her eyes cold and calculating. "It's a fair trade, don't you think? You get his possessions, and I get a place to live." Anger surged through me, my grief fueling my resolve. "No, I won't let you take everything away from me. This house was our dream, our future." She smirked, her triumph evident. "Think about it, Mary. You can either walk away with some memories or lose everything." As I looked into her eyes, I saw a reflection of the manipulation and greed that had poisoned her relationship with her own son. My heart ached, not just for my loss, but for the realization that her influence would linger even after his passing. In that moment, I made a choice. A choice to honor John's memory, to protect the life we had built together, and to stand up against the darkness that had consumed his mother's soul. The battle that lay ahead would be one of wits and wills, a confrontation that would determine the fate of our shared dreams. And as I gazed at his mother, I knew that the lessons I had learned from John's stories and his love would guide me through the storm that was about to descend upon us. With John's passing, the weight of his mother's greed and manipulation bore down on me. Her ultimatum, a house in exchange for his belongings, hung over my head like a dark cloud, but I was determined not to let her strip away the last remnants of the life we had shared. I reached out to a lawyer I knew, someone who could help me navigate the legal complexities of this situation. Together, we devised a plan, a cunning scheme that would turn her own manipulative tactics against her. As the contracts were drafted and the details ironed out, I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. This was my chance to teach her a lesson, to expose her true nature to the world. I was ready to face the battle head on, armed with the truth and a carefully calculated plan. The day came to put the plan into action. I arranged a meeting with John's mother, my heart pounding with anticipation. The lawyer had assured me that our plan was legally sound, but the outcome was far from certain. As she entered the lawyer's office, her expression confident and haughty, I greeted her with a tight smile. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Thompson." She waved a dismissive hand. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries. I assume you're ready to make the trade, his belongings for the house." I nodded, my resolve unwavering. "Yes, but before we proceed, there are a few formalities we need to go through." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering within them. "Formalities?" I motioned for her to sit, gesturing towards the contracts that lay on the table. "You see, in order to ensure that everything is fair and legal, we've had a couple of contracts drawn up." She glanced at the contracts, her confidence seemingly unshaken. "Contracts? I thought this was a simple exchange." I held back a smirk, my heart racing as the moment of truth approached. "It is, but we want to make sure that everything is properly documented. After all, it's a significant transaction." She leaned back in her chair, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Fine, let's get this over with." As we began to review the contracts, I maintained an air of professionalism, carefully guiding her through the process. With each passing moment, her arrogance seemed to grow, her belief that she was outsmarting me becoming more apparent. Finally, the time came to sign the contracts. I handed her the pen, my heart pounding as I watched her scrawl her signature on the dotted line of the first contract, the one that supposedly outlined the exchange of our respective properties. "And now your signature on the second contract, please," I said, my voice steady. She picked up the pen again, a self-satisfied grin on her face. "I can't believe you're actually going through with this." As she signed the second contract, the trap was set. The contracts had been intentionally switched. The one she had just signed was the actual house exchange, while the first one was a fabrication meant to appease her. I smiled, a genuine sense of satisfaction washing over me. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Thompson." Her demeanor shifted from smugness to confusion as she handed me the signed contracts. "What's the meaning of this?" I met her gaze with unwavering resolve. "This is a fair trade, Mrs. Thompson, just as you proposed." As I looked into her eyes, I saw a reflection of the manipulation and greed that had poisoned her relationship with her own son. My heart ached, not just for my loss, but for the realization that her influence would linger even after his passing. In that moment, I made a choice to honor John's memory, to protect the life we had built together, and to stand up against the darkness that had consumed his mother's soul. The battle that lay ahead would be one of wits and wills, a confrontation that would determine the fate of our shared dreams. And as I gazed at his mother, I knew that the lessons I had learned from John's stories and his love would guide me through the storm that was about to descend upon us. The day of the party arrived, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The once grand mansion of John's mother was now adorned with decorations and twinkling lights, a celebration of her supposed victory. Relatives and friends gathered, their voices a symphony of laughter and chatter as they toasted to her new home. I stood among the guests, my heart racing with a mixture of nervousness and determination. The plan had been set in motion, and I knew that this was the moment to unveil the truth. The truth about the woman who had tried to tear us apart, who had manipulated and schemed for her own gain. As the evening wore on, the mother-in-law's smugness was palpable. She moved through the crowd, basking in the attention, believing herself to be the master of the situation. But little did she know that the tables were about to turn. A hush fell over the crowd as I stepped forward, the spotlight suddenly on me. Her gaze turned towards me, curiosity and suspicion dancing within her eyes. I cleared my throat, my voice steady as I began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my tone carrying a weight of authority. I would like to take a moment to share some truths with you all. The guests turned their attention to me, a mixture of surprise and confusion evident on their faces. The mother-in-law's smile wavered, her gaze narrowing as she studied me. I stand before you today to shed light on a situation that has remained hidden for far too long, I continued, my gaze never leaving the mother-in-law's eyes. John's passing was a tragedy that left a void in my heart, but it also brought to the surface a web of manipulation and greed that had been woven by someone we all know. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd, and I could see the mother-in-law's expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. You see, I said, my voice unwavering, my late husband and I devised a plan to ensure that justice was served. We knew the depths of manipulation and deceit that had tainted the relationship between a mother and her son. Gasps filled the air, and the mother-in-law's face turned pale as realization dawned upon her. She stepped forward, her voice trembling with a hint of desperation. What are you talking about? I held up a document, the contract she had signed, transferring her house to me. This contract, signed by you, transfers ownership of your house to me. The shock in her eyes was undeniable, and the realization of her own downfall seemed to paralyze her. I learned from the best, I said, a touch of bitterness in my tone. I learned how to read between the lines, how to protect my interests, and how to expose manipulation. You were so focused on gaining material possessions that you failed to see the real treasures: love, compassion, and family. The guests watched in stunned silence, their eyes shifting between us. The mother-in-law's face contorted with anger and defeat. You can't do this. This is my house. This is my house. I looked at her, my gaze unwavering. You orchestrated your own downfall, just as you did with your relationship with John. You deserve the consequences of your actions. I turned to the crowd, my voice filled with resolve. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to know the truth about this woman. I want you to know that her manipulation and greed have caused pain to those she claims to care about. But today, justice has been served. I invite you all to witness her departure from the house she thought she could claim. The mother-in-law was left speechless, her facade shattered as the truth was exposed for all to see. She had lost not only her ill-gotten possessions, but also the respect and trust of those around her. Leave this house within 30 days, I said, my voice carrying a finality that left no room for negotiation. It's time to face the consequences of your actions. As the crowd began to disperse, whispers of shock and disbelief filling the air, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The weight of her manipulation, the burden of her schemes, had been lifted from my shoulders. And as I looked around, I realized that I was finally free from her grasp, free from her greed, and free to honor the memory of the man I had loved. With John's spirit as my guide, I knew that I could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as I stood in the midst of our new home, surrounded by the echoes of the truth I had unveiled, I felt a sense of closure and contentment that I had never thought possible.